Lt-Colonel Ian Hutson from the Salvation Army. I started doing a doctorate in this country. Oh gosh, good old days when you could stay at university forever. And worst thing ever happened to me was I won a scholarship after I'd done my undergraduate degree. So I went, oh God, and they gave it to me for 3 years. So I thought, oh, I'll start my doctorate then. No, that was silly. But anyhow, it didn't matter. But my doctorate was in religious education, or religious history in actual fact, in New Zealand, of the things. And so the Salvation Army were part of that. Extraordinary story about them coming to New Zealand, the Salvation Army, 19th century, because General Booth, as you know, started up the Salvation Army in Britain. They wanted to work in the worst places, and sure enough they did. I think they were originally offshoot of the Methodists in actual fact, or it might have been the Anglicans, I don't know, in the UK, but anyhow, when they came to New Zealand, they were regarded as much of a pest as rabbits and sparrows. The Salvation Army. And the women wore sort of coal bucket hats. And other women would go to where the Salvation Army was because they considered the coal bucket hats actually quite fashionable. But they would also play bands and march up and down, and they were involved in the temperance movement and things like that, which is why they came to be regarded. They were sort of the best way to describe it would be that they were the late 19th century equivalent of the people who, this is how they were perceived certainly by the established people at the time, by the people who super glue themselves to highways at 8 o'clock in the morning in Wellington. They were sort of regarded as the equivalent of that. But they've gone on, as we know, and were very, very respectable, and then had a tanglement with the homosexual law reform bill, in which they were quite conservative on that, which is fair enough, you're allowed to be, but then the Liberals decided they didn't like them after all. But they're still around, and they're still doing good work. And Lt-Colonel Ian Hutson of the Salvation Army joins us now. Welcome to the show. Love to have you on.
Kia ora, good to be with you. Quite a good history there.
Did you? Well, you'd be aware of all that, though, wouldn't you?
Yeah.
You were regarded as pests.
Yeah, from the Methodist Church, as you said. We came out of there. Yeah.
No. Now, you are based where? In Auckland?
In Wellington, yeah.
Oh, you're in Wellington. Okay. So on a daily basis then, Ian, I'm presuming that you see the homelessness in all their graphic detail. Can you... and we know what the problem is, and you've reported on it. In fact, the Salvation Army have this is almost a crusade to try and do something about the homelessness plight. But one of the things that I've noticed is that there isn't a simple solution, because if there was, that would have been found by now. Is that because almost every homeless person is different in terms of the reason that they're homeless?
I think like you say, there's a lot of different reasons. One of the obvious reasons is there's not enough affordable housing, so that people fall into homelessness either because there's no house to go to or because they can't afford any house. So some of the people that become homeless are maybe their income isn't adequate, so it could be irregular work, or they may be on the benefit. And I mean, there's different things happening, like there's benefit sanctions, there's a whole range of things. But
how does a benefit sanction make me homeless?
Well, if you were, let's just say you were living in a house and your income was marginal, you had enough to pay the rent, and then your benefit got even just a certain amount of sanction put on it, that you go from just being able to cover the rent to not being able to cover the rent. And then that's the slippery slope of what happens after that. So, I mean, it's not just about benefits, though, because there's working people who may be irregular income. They've got work which varies, or maybe the job itself doesn't earn a whole lot, and then some expenses come along, they get behind on the rent. And what we have is people that we work with who, if they don't get to us or other organisations like us, the landlord might say, you haven't paid the rent, come on, they might even give them several warnings. But what sometimes happens is people they can't figure a solution to it, and they do the old ostrich thing, because they can't figure out what to do, and they just sort of hope it'll all go away, and eventually they get evicted. And the other reason that some people get evicted or leave or become homeless, as we've discovered, is domestic violence or relationship difficulties, where they have to leave, but they can't then access housing um, separately, because
But
they're understood.
I hear all of these issues, and I understand what you're saying. I've been through some of them
Yes.
myself in my lifetime, but I've never
Yep.
ended up homeless. And I'm thinking to myself, that's because most people who would be getting into straitened circumstances or things don't work out so well usually have some sort of support network, and usually family or whānau would be there.
Yep.
So I'm assuming that there are other things going on in their lives other than the fact that they don't have enough money at a particular time to end up sleeping in shop doorways or on recreational reserves.
Yeah, well, I think there is mental health and addiction issues,
Mm.
but it's like a pathway. They all combine together. I mean, because when you look at it, in essence, uh, well, I don't know. You could probably recall. I know because I've been a Salvation Army officer for 40 years. Um, there wasn't When I first went overseas. I saw my first street people living on the street. I hadn't seen that before. And it's sort of been a long journey to get to this point, and some of it relates to lack of social housing. Um, some of it relates to not having enough social support. Like you say, they all sort of come together. It's not one thing that ends up there. And we've got higher levels of mental health uh, issues with people. So
No,
yeah,
no, I have no difficulty with what you're
I'm,
saying, and I'm sure you're right. That's my anecdotal experience of the homeless, who I have to say I see in Wellington, is that they are a mixture of clearly addicts, either drug or alcohol,
yes, yep.
and often usually with the comorbidity of a mental health issue. Now,
That,
I,
that'd be correct.
so is that if I just describe the majority of homeless people, that those would be sort of common trait?
I think the ones on the street are at the high end, but there are also people living in parks, and so there's a lot of different
Yeah.
places. Then there's the couch surfers and all of that. But at that end, I would say the level of mental health and addiction issues is definitely more prevalent with the people on the street.
Okay. So how do we and so as we know, people are getting irritated by them. Bylaws are being introduced. The police are being urged by shop owners and by councils to do something about it, etc. What can you do to assist those most remarkable of individuals to move from those locations? What assistance can the state provide? What sort of assistance, for example, do you provide at the Salvation Army?
Well, the type of thing that can help people like the ones that are in the street is being able to access mental health support, as you say, and as well as the addiction treatment. And some of it's actually a bit of a journey, because people, when they get to that level, have often become somewhat mistrustful. And well, I'll give an example of a person that we had helped a while back. Um, they've fallen out of the community completely. Or and when they get to the street, sometimes they find a kind of a bond that might not seem the greatest of bonds to us, but they have each other's back to some extent. And
I understand. Yeah.
we got this person into a house. It was, several suburbs over, and then several weeks later they came back. And we said, what the heck were
Yep.
you doing there? And what we found was that he said he was so lonely, um, had nobody. Uh, I think part of it is being part of a community. And if I mean, some of the people we've got in some of our social housing come from those kind of backgrounds. And what we try to create in our social housing is a community. So it's not just an individual stuck in a house on their own. We try to create a community that they are involved with, that they participate in, that they get support from, along with some of the mental health and addiction support that might come from the professionals. It's actually the other residents there that they
Listen,
collect.
listening to you, I have no doubt of your intent, your compassion, or your empathy with these individuals, and your practical assistance in trying to help. That's a very interesting anecdote you've just given me too, I have to say. Even if these people can't look after themselves, though, can they, Ian, at the end of the day? I mean, that's the real problem. They can't literally make a logical decision to get out of a particular
Mm,
plight that they're in either. There is no pathway for them. Given that
mm,
we know that to be the case, isn't it the only answer to basically scoop them all up, put them into some sort of residential accommodation somewhere, and treat them well? Not Don't give them the degree of independence that they've got, because if you do, then they're just going to simply go back onto the street.
mm.
In actual fact, be quite disciplined in how you treat them. Provide them with their mental health, but also make sure they have a decent shower, 3 meals a day, and a roof over their head. Is that what's missing here?